All right, let's get started. Any questions regarding interest rate parity? Or anything? So today we're gonna talk about purchasing power type. We start chapter 8. So if we talk about, let's say, two countries in the world. And if we say inflation is more in the home country, what do you think of in terms of international trade? If inflation is more in the home country, what you can think of impact, influence on that, on the international trade?
It lowers the balance of trade because you're importing more,
Importing more. Why are we going to import more?
because domestic prices are higher.
Okay. Okay. What about other one? Export. Do you think export should be constant, or it will go up? It will go down. What do you think of export? Go up? Why? So that's definitely correct. Import should go up because goods are cheaper in one country, right? But what about export? Stay the same, goes down. Think of the intuition. Intuition. Think about people from foreign. What is the main objective? Buy cheap or buy expensive? Buy cheap. See, if they want to buy cheap, should they buy from USA or their own country? Own country, right? Because it's cheap in their own country, not in USA, right? So make sense? Now convert this story on the demand and supply of these two currencies. Convert this story. See, direction is clear, right? Import goes up, export goes down. In a way, people will demand less of US, people will demand more of UK, right? Like people will demand less of US dollar and more of British pound, right? So impact is clear, direction, no offsetting impact, right? People will demand more of pound, less of pound. And what you can think of? Any changes on the exchange rate? Or no changes on the exchange rate? Changes? What could be the expected change? Classical economic theory, if you given something more, price goes up or goes down? Goes up, right? So what we are demanding more? British pound. So British pound should appreciate. So foreign currency, in our case, British pound appreciate. Right? If not, if this does not happen, there is a problem. If it does not happen, there is a problem. The problem is people can easily go to UK from US and buy goods. Make sense? There is a disparity. So according to purchasing power parity or PPP, purchase power parity, means depending on the differential inflation in two different countries, exchange rate should be adjusted in a way that similar goods in two different countries worth or cost same. Make sense? So let's say, think about similar goods. Let's say 1 dozen of X, similar goods in both different countries. If inflation is more in US after a certain point of time, exchange rate should be adjusted in a way so that in terms of currency value, similar goods, 1 dozen of X should cost same in these two different countries. So that is the underlying objective of purchasing power parity. Make sense? Okay. Which we're gonna learn and talk about a lot today. So, two different forms of purchasing power parity. Absolute form, relative form. When we say absolute form, two cautions. First caution is assume no international barriers. It's trying to say goods are easily transferable one country to another. Easily transferable. A certain goods easily transferable one country to another without incurring any cost, without incurring any barriers, any issues. This is the first assumption. And second thing, it's trying to tell is like price of the same goods in two different countries should be equal. So following from the original example, let's say today's exchange rate, 1 British pound is basically $1.60. Inflation went up in USA. Inflation went up in USA. Before inflation, 1 dozen of eggs used to be $1.60 in Walmart. Before inflation, 1 dozen of eggs was 1 British pound in, they have a book whatever in Tesco, something like that in UK. After inflation, in Walmart, new price of eggs become 180. According to absolute form of purchase power of parity, it is telling goods are easily transferable one country to another, right? If there is no changes in inflation in British, if 1 dozen of eggs still worth £1 in super shop in UK, exchange rate should be adjusted in a way so that they cost similar. So the new exchange rate would be like this. Now, after the inflation, after new adjustment, you buy eggs from Walmart or Tesco, doesn't matter. Because they cost same, right? In these two different countries, right? So this is basically the idea of absolute form of purchase price. Questions? When you move from absolute to relative form of purchase probability, first assumption, market is not perfect. Goods are not easily transferable. We all know that, right? Goods are not easily transferable from one country to another. There are frictions, there are problems. What they are? Transaction cost, taxes, for sure at least. Even if you think of buying eggs in Texas versus buying eggs in Missouri, do you guys know the difference? Have you ever lived in Texas? Anyone from here? Other than me? If you buy eggs in the Walmart of Texas, difference is no tax. In Texas, if you buy grocery, no tax. If you buy eggs, if you buy fresh produce, if you buy maybe rice, beans, not processed food, no tax. Is it true in the Walmart in the Baltimore? No, right? Is this a friction? Is this a problem? If you think, hey, buying eggs is cheap in Texas than Missouri, why not we buy from Texas, right? Should we drive to Texas to buy eggs and then come back? Yes, given the gas price? Definitely not, right? In that case, even if it seems like egg price is cheaper in Texas, expensive in Missouri, it may seem like there is a disparity, right? Which is not true in reality because there are frictions. Frictions means cost. There's some sort of cost that is not allowing the economy to be fully aligned. There are friction, there are transaction costs, there are taxes. Different countries charge import tax, export tax differently, right? Sometimes they do not charge export tax with their political allies. Sometimes they charge more export tax with whom they do not have any allies. These are some frictions. If these are frictions, it is tough to say exchange rate should be aligned exactly like this. Rather, should align at least by the same percentage. What does it mean? Going back there. Let's say inflation in these two countries used to be like that in the base period. Now inflation become like this. What are the changes you can see? 4% high inflation in US, right? So according to relative form of purchase power parity, British pound against US dollar should appreciate by 4%. So the currency value, exchange rate between two countries should adjust, appreciate or depreciate based on the inflation differentials. This is called relative form of purchase power parity. Make sense? Any questions so far? If not, then what's gonna happen? Consumer will move towards the location where prices are cheap, right? And your continuous transaction will lead the economy to be parity. So this is the formula. This is the formula you can think of how the exchange rate or how the foreign currency should move depending on inflation in two different countries. If we say this was the base period we started and we got 1 British pound is equal to $1.60 60 cents US dollar, right? Things got changes. Let's plug in the values. How much you find? How much? 4%, right? So the idea is home country, if the home country has more inflation, foreign country will appreciate. Make sense? Home country has less inflation. Foreign currency will be appreciating. You can memorize the rule of thumb, or you can just understand the intuition. People will always go towards cheap purchase, right? We always prefer that, right? When you want to buy a same car, two different dealership, if they're offering two different price, where do you go? Cheap one, right? So if inflation will lower for any country, if inflation is lower for any country, the intuition is everyone will want to buy from that country. So they will demand that currency. Higher demand, appreciation. Change the story, just flip upside down, you will get the answer for the other currency. Inflation is high, no one gonna demand to buy from that country. Lower demand for that currency will depreciate. The same formula could be approximated. Could be approximated by this one. If we summarize so far what we learned in nutshell, it's here. High local inflation. Think of the intuition. High local inflation. What is the outcome? Import increase, export decrease. That means, on an average, we are leaning towards foreign currency. We are demanding more foreign currency. Local depreciate, foreign appreciate. By how much? Inflation differential between these two countries. Inflation differentials. Flip the story. Low local inflation. If local inflation is low, what is the outcome? Everyone will lean towards us, right? They want to buy from us. Import decrease, export increase. Local currency should appreciate how much? Inflation differential. Both are similar. Both are similar. No impact, right? Doesn't matter. People have not higher demand, lot lesser demand for any country goods and services, right? As a result, people will not have higher or lower demand for the currency for these two countries, right? No changes. Or you can also think of local should be changed by inflation differentials. Inflation differentials is 0%, right? So no changes. Questions? Is this line looks familiar? With what? Familiar with what? Interest rate pattern, right? So purchase power parity is same thing. 45-degree line, one-to-one relationship between inflation differentials and currency spot rate. So the idea is if inflation differentials increase or decrease, that should be impacted on the two countries spot rate, right? And that's why it's a 45-degree line. If home country has more inflation, foreign currency appreciate, right? Home country has less inflation, foreign country spot rate should depreciate, right? Any point on the parity line, confirming that market is consistent, market is equilibrium, right? Any line, any point that is not on the parity line, there is a disparity. So how could we explain this point? Think about this, do a brainstorm, and how could we explain point C? Okay, so be careful when you say inflation, it's a big I. Okay, when you say interest, small I, small cap, big cap. 4%. So we're talking about point C, right? So home country has more inflation, and foreign currency only appreciated 1%, right? If I say +1 appreciation, -1 depreciation, okay? Now what is the problem? Why we should demand more foreign currency? Absolutely. So if people in home currency still go outside to buy, they have still room there, because inflation is still 4% higher in the home country than the foreign country, right? But from the previous point, foreign currency only appreciated 1% only. Only 1%. So if people in home country, they change their home currency with foreign currency and then pay for the goods and services, things will be still cheaper for the people of home country. You can say that from this point C, if it exists like that, you can say that home country people still have more purchase power. Make sense? Home country people still have more purchase power, because if they convert their home currency to the foreign currency, go to the foreign country, buy their goods and services, they still have more purchase power. What about this point, point D? Okay. So point D. How much? Okay. And foreign currency depreciate by how much? What is the problem that can be rectified? And how can we rectify this problem? Right? We still have some room to buy cheap. Why? So right now, if you look carefully, foreign currency supposed to be depreciated by 3%, right? But did it depreciate by 3%? It depreciated less, right? It depreciated less. So foreign people, maybe, I don't know, UK, even if convert their currency to US dollar by here, they still have more purchase power because it did not depreciate it that much. It should have depreciated more, right? So foreign people more purchase power. According to point D. Makes sense? Any questions? Different points in or around the purchase power value. All good so far? We talked about this, so we are done. Let's see. Yes, we are done. You know, we're done. Okay. Now, how can we think of whether purchase power parity hold or not among different countries? Like, how can we test? What are some different ways of testing whether purchase power parity hold or not? Easy and quick is simple test of purchase power parity. So the idea is, let's say this is between US and Canada, US and Swiss franc, US in Japan, US in British pound. Okay. If you look these graphs, what you can think of? Purchase power parity hold or not?
One of these policy person didn't justify the inflation.
Why did not adjust by the inflation differential? That's your question. So the answer is don't jump onto that question. So the thing is that this is all real data. This is all real data. So when any inflation changes between US and Canada, US and Swiss franc, how much spot rate changes? This is real data. So now my question is, do you think this is consistent with purchase power parity or not? No. Why? Absolutely. If you draw most of the points are not on the parity line, right? Most of the points are in different places of n lines. So purchase power parity do not hold for these four examples. That's my point is. So how can you check? So that again, what was the objective? Our objective was if you look at the real data, how can you check whether parity holds or not? Easy way, plot the real data, graph the 45-degree line. If you see most of them were on the line, that means for these two countries, purchase power parity hold. If you see most of them are not on the line, purchase power parity do not hold within two countries. Now coming to Lina's questions, why it do not hold, we'll answer in 2 slides or 3 slides, okay? Hold on a little bit. Now this is one of the way that purchase power parity do not hold. Second way, statistical testing. How many of we know this? How many of from this class know what is regression analysis? No one. But in the beginning of the class, I was listening some words called econometric. Some of you are talking about econometric classes. So did you guys go over regression on your statistics or econometric classes? So what we do in regression? What we do in regression?
I mean, you're basically looking at the relationship between variables and you have multiple.
Absolutely. So in regression analysis, this is a very sophisticated statistical econometric framework that's trying to identify the relationship between two variables, right? So if you guys are taking regression econometric classes, you guys should have known this equation. If not, it could be a new equation. So the idea is, this is our dependent variable, this is our independent variable, right? X is independent, Y is dependent variable. So this coefficient is trying to check or trying to identify the relationship between these two, right? And from the purchase power parity line, just looking at the graph, what should be the relationship? Positive or negative? Okay, what should be the relationship? 1 to 1 or 1 to different number? Like if 1 to 1, right? So that being said, this V should be +1. So the regression analysis is basically designed. We will not go over. We're trying to just brief you qualitatively. Regression analysis is trying to tell you the differentials between home and foreign country inflation on Y side, foreign currency spot rate changes, whether these two are 1 to 1 related or not, measured by this coefficient. If you have series of real data from here, right? And run the regression, any software you can, Excel, Stata, SAS, MATLAB, R, whichever you know. Run the regression. This B should pop out. If as 1, parity hold. Something different, 2, 3, 4, 5, positive or negative side. or 0. Result does not hold. Parity do not hold. If you run this real data, you should not get this one, right? Because from the graphics, we can say that results do not hold. Make sense? So how can we test purchase power parity hold or not? Plot the real data, draw the polymetric line. If most of the points, it's really impossible to expect, or it's not right to expect everything should be on the line, right? Most of the, because 95% or 99% of the points are on the line, you can say purchase power parity hold. Or go for sensitivity test regression analysis. If that comes out like this, it holds. If not, it doesn't hold. Make sense? Now, why results do not hold? Why in practice we do find that purchase power parity do not hold. One of the main reasons, if we read our hypothetical example, we start from a starting point, right? We assume that this point is in equilibrium. We assume that this is the picture perfect situation for both of these countries. In reality, this cannot be true. This may not be true. Sometimes the base period we started from is not an equilibrium period. As a result, subsequent changes in inflation, subsequent changes in exchange rate does not follow purchase power parity. So that's one of the main problems. Second problem, going back to chapter 3 or 4, what affect spot rate? What affect spot rate movement? If you can remember, inflation is not the only factor, right? Inflation, interest rate, national income, government controls, and also speculation based on expectation that affect the spot rate, right? So going back to our origin example, that from the base period, there is a rise in inflation in US, right? And we said that if this is happened, import between US and UK should what? Rise or decrease? US people will import more or less? More. Export from US should drop, right? What if UK government said we are not going to export to US? We will face a trade barrier. You will face a trade barrier between UK and US, which we know as government controls. If they do so, do you think purchase power parity will hold? Purchase power parity between US and UK will hold? No, right? No trade, no export and import between US and UK. If there is no export and import between US and UK, that means people within two countries should not have more or less demand on these two different currencies, right? If they are not able to have more demand for British pound should not have gonna be appreciated, right? That's one of the reason could be. If inflation is more, in the next class, we learn that if inflation is more, there should be more interest rate. We're gonna talk about in the next class. So we know that investors always chase high interest rate, right? So there will be more flow coming to US as a function of foreign investors depositing more money to US, right? And there should be a reverse impact. As a result, purchase power parity should not be whole, right? So the idea is inflation is not the only element that influence or that affect exchange rate changes. That's not the only element. So many different elements that affect exchange rate changes. So many different elements have so many different impacts. Some increase, some offset the impact, right? So as a result, it's really, really tough that purchase power parity gonna hold. But at the same time, if disparity exists, people will try to act on that, and their act will lead towards the parity. Make sense? Their act will lead towards the parity. I have seen one of my friends, it's a very weird example, but I have seen one of my friends traveling from Oklahoma to Michigan to buy a car. He literally fly from Oklahoma to Michigan to buy a brand new car, drive back to Oklahoma. Because of what? It used to be, I still think most of the car manufacturing companies, they have headquarters in Detroit, right? Most of the cases, prices are cheap there, reasonably cheap. So the idea was, if disparity exists, people will try to act on that, and their action will lead us to reach equilibrium of the parity. Question so far? Another limitations why purchase power parity do not hold. Sometimes it's tough to find substitute goods. Tough to find substitute goods because world is not only confined to X, right? That X in UK is similar to X in US, right? There are so many goods, tough to find substitutions. If you think about luxury goods, resorts or different automobiles, there it's really, really tough to find a substitute, right? So that's why you cannot compare whether it's cheap or expensive in one part of the world so that you can go somewhere else to buy cheap. Three problems. Starting point may not be equilibrium point. So even if we are trying to track changes and trying to find a new equilibrium, that should not be right. Second thing, inflation is not the only factor that affects exchange rate changes. So many other factors that affect exchange rate differently. Their aggregate or combined effect may not allow us to reach participation. But it's not always easy to find substitute goods so that we can compare inflation differentials and how it should affect spot rate or currency rate. Question so far? All good so far? We're going to stop here today, but there are some important notifications for upcoming classes. First notifications for my office hours today. It is only up to 4 p.m. for today only. Starting from tomorrow, next 2 classes will be online. This Thursday, next week. Classes will be online. So the idea is, so far we have read a lot of topics from the book. But I want you to listen to some industry experts, think about international business, pros and cons. So I'll upload some webinar. So basically it will be one webinar. Log into Blackboard on the class time, Thursday and Tuesday. Split the webinar into 2 parts. Watch the equal half this Tuesday. Watch the later half next Tuesday. Okay. And all of my office hours until next Tuesday is online. So either email, Zoom, you can. So any questions? Good so far? So that's all? Okay.